Have you ever seen this happen? Maybe as a student, a teacher, or even a parent. Everything seems to be going right. The teacher is incredible, the lesson is crystal clear, but for some reason, the learning just doesn't stick. It is one of the most frustrating things in all of education. Today, we're going to unravel that mystery, and we're not going to do it by looking at people, but by looking at the classroom itself.
I mean, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's a puzzle that plays out in classrooms all over the world every single day. It's like you have all the right ingredients for a perfect cake, you follow the recipe exactly, but it just won't rise. So if it's not the teacher, and it's not the lesson plan, what on earth is going on?
All right, so let's put on our detective hats. To solve this mystery, the first thing we have to do is line up the usual suspects. You know, the common explanations we always jump to. The ones that seem so obvious, but as we're about to find out, they usually miss the point completely. You know these guys, right? We've all heard them. Oh, it must be the teacher's fault. Or the kids these days are just lazy. Or maybe this stuff is just too hard for them. These are the easy answers, the go-to culprits. But what if they aren't the real causes at all? What if they're just symptoms of something much, much deeper? And here it is. This is the big twist. The real problem isn't a who, it's a what. The culprit is the hidden architecture of the classroom itself. It's an environment that creates something called cognitive load. And I'm telling you, once you understand this one concept, you will never look at a classroom the same way again. So what in the world is a high-load environment? Well, a classroom isn't some quiet, peaceful library where you just absorb information. No way. It's a high-pressure zone. At any given moment, a student is trying to juggle the new math concept and what their friends think of them, and the fear of being called on, and the clock ticking down. It's an unbelievably demanding place to be.
This slide shows perfectly how it all builds up. They call it load stacking. So you start with the main task, learn a new thing. Simple enough. But then you stack on top of that the need to manage how you look to your peers. Then you stack on the absolute terror of getting it wrong in public. And before you know it, the student's mental bandwidth, their cognitive architecture is just completely fried. The whole system crashes. And this is the critical part. Once that system is overloaded, the brain's ability to make sense of anything new, its coherence, is gone. It's compromised. At that point, it doesn't matter how clearly the teacher explains something, the system is full. It literally cannot take in any more information. You know that feeling, I get it when you say it, but I can't do it myself? Yeah, that's this. That's what this is.
Now here's where it gets really wild. Some of our most common, well-intentioned teaching strategies, the things we do to help, can actually be throwing gasoline on this cognitive fire. Let's look at a couple of examples.
Okay, think about a teacher asking a student a question in front of the whole class. The intention is great, right? Check for understanding, keep them engaged, but look at what's really happening. You've just jacked up the cognitive load to 1,000. Suddenly, it's not about the answer anymore. It's about a public performance and the massive risk of being wrong in front of everybody. The brain immediately flips from learning mode to self-protection mode. Or how about active learning, group projects, presentations at the front of the room? Again, fantastic idea, but if a student's cognitive load is already blinking red, pushing them into an activity with more social exposure can be the thing that pushes them right over the edge. It can actually speed up the mental shutdown we're trying so hard to avoid. Turns out, timing is everything. And the all-time classic, repetition. You don't get it? I'll just say it again. That only works if the person has the mental capacity to actually hear you. If they're already overloaded, all you're doing is reinforcing the feeling of stress and failure. It becomes the soundtrack to their anxiety. You're basically shouting at someone who's already wearing noise-canceling headphones.
This brings us to a really profound shift in how we see things. When you see a student who's checked out, head on the desk, staring out the window, our immediate reaction is to think they're lazy or they're apathetic. But what if it's something else entirely? What if it's not a bug, but a feature of how their brain is wired? The term for this is structural withdrawal, and it's so important we get this. It is not a conscious choice. The student isn't trying to be defiant. It's an involuntary, protective reflex. When the brain is faced with an overwhelming amount of load, it pulls the emergency brake. It shuts down learning to save energy for what it thinks is survival. It's a biological act of self-preservation. So this is the big idea right here. That behavior we call disengagement. From this point of view, it's just load minimization. The student isn't being lazy. Their brain is actually being incredibly smart.
It's doing the only logical thing it can do to protect itself, reduce the incoming pressure all the way to zero.
So once we start looking at the classroom through this lens of load, we can start to see all kinds of student behaviors in a new way. They're not character flaws. They're just direct responses to the pressure of the environment.
I love this slide. It's like a new decoder ring for the classroom. That kid who's always acting out, the one we call disruptive, maybe that's just load discharge. They're trying to release all that built-up pressure. The apathetic student, we now know that's load minimization. And maybe the most important one, the quiet, invisible student, the one who never causes trouble but never really participates, that could be a sign of chronic overload. Their system has learned that the safest thing to do is just withdraw completely.
So, if the problem is architectural, then the solution has to be architectural too. This isn't about finding some magical new teaching style. It's about redesigning the environment itself to create the conditions where any good teaching can actually succeed.
And here it is. This is the blueprint. For learning to really happen, we have to manage the environment, we have to regulate the load, we have to make sure a student's understanding is stable before we add more complexity. We have to protect their identity, making it psychologically safe to be wrong, and, critically, we have to separate the act of learning from the stress of being graded. These are the real pillars for an effective learning structure.
And that brings us to this final thought, which just sums it all up perfectly. We can have the most brilliant teachers in the world, with the most incredible lessons. But if the classroom itself is overloading the brain we're trying to teach, none of that content is ever going to stick. So the challenge isn't just about explaining things better. It's about building environments, building structures where those explanations actually have a fighting chance to land. And that, well, that changes everything.